Hey guys, today we're going to get into the third anime on this channel. We've done some Naruto and One Piece, and this time we're going to be doing some Bleach. To be more specific, we're going to be analysing or reviewing the new 13 episodes of the Thousand Year Blood War. I thought this was a great way to start the franchise for this channel, so without further ado, let's get into it. When I heard the Thousand Year Blood War arc was getting animated after such a long hiatus, I was thrilled. Bleach is one of my favourite series ever, and the Thousand Year Blood War arc is Kubo at his most ambitious. So finding out it was getting animated was freaking amazing. It more than lived up to everything I wanted. They've pretty much stuck to the manga for the first 13 episodes, not going too off-road yet, which I think is smart. As you most likely know, the first invasion of the Thousand Year Blood War arc is the most structured and well-formatted part of this massive arc, so the animators didn't need to go crazy with changing things up. The anime has only a limited number of episodes, so it makes sense that they would include the big extra added scenes into the part that needed it the most, and the part that me and most fans want the most are the fights. For example, Uryu versus Hashwolf, Killgay versus Askin, and most importantly, the Zero Division. I've even heard in the next season there'll be a whole new fight that wasn't in the manga. Perhaps Bazby versus Shinji is a popular one I keep hearing getting thrown around, and that would be absolutely awesome to see. Having said all this, it doesn't mean that the anime hasn't included new scenes at all, and I'll go over the ones I liked the most in this video. But for right now, let's start from the first episode and how I felt about it. And it should be obvious, but this video will definitely contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen the Thousand Year Blood War, then click off now. For a reintroduction into Bleach, this was phenomenal. We get the badass scene where they introduce the main gang. Ichigo, Orihime, Chad, and Uryu, who come in to slay a bunch of hollows after saving Ryunosuke and Shino. This scene is accompanied by the great and iconic number 1. Hearing this soundtrack for the first time in years literally gave me goosebumps. It got me so high for the series, and that only increased when I saw the artwork. Oh my fucking god, this show is beautiful. Bleach was always up there in terms of animation. They had a few hiccups, but generally it was great visuals. But they freaking outdone themselves. It's legit one of the best things of this new series. The landscapes and backgrounds are capturing and engaging. The attacks look so fresh and crisp. But for me, by far the best art is the characters themselves. One of the first shots we get is Kurosuchi. He literally looks like anime level animation. Not to mention when we finally get to see Ichigo again. He looks so badass and cool. I could literally make a whole 20-minute video on just the art alone. But to get back on track, the first episode has a nice little bit where we get introduced to Eburn, a very minor and insignificant character all things considered, but just seeing that get off my bed scene just filled me with so much nostalgia. We also have the shocking and sad scene of Chojiro getting ruthlessly impaled by the Quincy. Chojiro dying was the first big shock of this arc. Kubo has a habit of not killing any of our good guys, so to see Chojiro get killed was astonishing to a lot of people. But I'm glad they gave him a better showing later in the anime than they did the manga. However, I am sad that Byakuya's eulogy for him was left out. Speaking of the Quincy, this is where we first get introduced to the main big bad of the show, Yuha. Now, for the sake of my own clarity, I'll be referring to him simply as Yuha, so don't step on my dick about it. It just makes things much easier, and it's what I'm used to. As far as introducing villains go, this was spectacular. He immediately cuts off Luda's arms, then proceeds to claim that he doesn't like conflict. The animators do a great job of making him look powerful and imposing, like an all-powerful king that you shouldn't mess with. They absolutely nailed Yuha. Another notable thing to point out for this new season is that they're not restricted by censorship like they were back in the day. Yuha proceeds to kill both Eburn and Luders in a very bloody way, and we get to see all of it, which is good, considering the Thousand Year Blood War arc is incredibly violent, so it was a bit of a relief that there was no apparent censorship. In episode 2, we get to see Nell unexpectedly fall down from the sky in a very nostalgic and amusing way, crashing right into Ichigo and proceeding to tell him that Waco Mundo has been invaded and that Haribel has been defeated. This is one change I hope they make later. I would love to see Haribel do something later in the series, because in the manga we legit get one panel from her, then never see her again, so I hope they change that. Ichigo rushes into Waco Mundo alongside Nell, Orihime, Chad, and Kisuke. We get to see some familiar faces like Manoli and Loli, not to mention the Tribestia and their grotesque monster known as Aeon. But the MVP of this little mini arc is the Stern Ritter Jay the Jail, Killgay Opie. Now I should also quickly mention my pronunciation is fucking terrible, so I really do apologize if I butcher any of the names in this video. But Killgay is one of my favourite Sternritter. I think they got his adaptation near perfect. We immediately see how brutal and sadistic he is when he impales all the helpless Arrancar, one by one, taking sick enjoyment in it. He also effortlessly takes down Loli and Manoli, but things start getting good when the Tribestia come in and start taking down all these men with animation that looks so slick. I think we even get a green Cero from Apache, which looked cooler than her previous red one. Killgay, however, takes them down off-screen after they refuse to join the Vandenreich. It's here we learn that the anime in question is in fact the Quincy, and that Ichigo is also a special war potential. We also have the Soul Society getting ready for war, and Yuha preparing his forces to invade, now that Ichigo is out of the way in Waco Mundo. This notion that Ichigo is such a huge threat that the enemy is specifically waiting for him to be indisposed so they can invade the Soul Society is so freaking cool, because it goes to show how powerful Ichigo has become. It makes us as the watchers feel a sense of pride, because we know what everything Ichigo has gone through to reach this level of power, all the obstacles he had to overcome. So it's so appealing that this mysterious enemy is reacting like this. Episode 3 is when things start getting really insane. Ichigo has a little scuffle with Killgay before the Tribestia pick themselves up and activate their chimera monster, Ion. Ion beats Killgay around a little bit before Killgay restores his freaking broken neck with his blute. One of the most badass scenes in the anime, then begins to use a truly underrated move, the English terminology for it being Holy Slave, where Killgay enslaves and absorbs all the nearby reishi. He then uses it to tear the flesh straight from Ion's body into himself. This is where a moment in the anime that is actually censored. In the manga, this scene is incredibly visual and graphic, like something straight out of a H.P. Lovecraft novel. We also have the emergence of the Sternritter in the Soul Society, and get to see Basby brutally take down Kira with a burner finger, and then completely take down the rest of the 3rd Division's seated officers with ease. The whole sequence looks amazing, with how he points out his finger and instantly blows off one of the guy's heads straight clean off. The Sternritter theme also suits him so well. It gives off the vibes of an empire going to war. We also have the really tense moment with Kurosuchi and the Captain Commander Yamamoto. Yamamoto questions Kurosuchi on why he acted alone and why he didn't handle the situation sooner. But Kurosuchi, in a moment of epicness, calls the head captain out on his own foolishness by how he didn't listen to the mad scientist when he informed him about Uryu Ishida, and goes on to accuse him that they're in this position now because he couldn't kill Yuha 100 years ago. Like, seriously, the balls of steel on Kurosuchi is insane. But like, where's the lie? This scene also goes to show that the Soul Society has little cracks forming, that they're not all on the same page, something that would prove disastrous later on. But the best thing about this new season is how they're giving more stuff for Uryu to do. This whole arc is supposed to be about him, yet he barely does anything in the manga, so the anime team giving him all these little scenes throughout the series is much appreciated. After invading the Soul Society, the Sternritter each have one-on-one face-offs against the captains, and this is where things start going horribly wrong for the Soul Society. Operating on bad information, Byakuya, Toshiro, Soifon, and Komamura each have their bunkai stolen by the enemy. This scene is so powerful because your bunkai isn't just a weapon or ability, it's your very self, part of your soul, if you would. So having these taken from you is an unimaginable loss that can't truly be comprehended. With the loss of their bunkai comes an incredibly heavy wave of despair. How can they defeat these powerful enemies without going all out? We also see in this episode some great character development from Akon, when he decides to go above his station and summon Ichigo back into the Soul Society. Ichigo, after being able to handle Killgay, goes immediately after Killgay steps in and delivers Killgay a fatal injury. But Killgay forgot Ranson Tengai, and Killgay uses the power of his shrift to imprison Ichigo, making him helpless. As you all know, Killgay is pretty much the only Quincy that uses all these Quincy abilities, and they suit him so well. Holy slave to dominate his opponents, and Renso Tengai to turn his body into a living weapon for his divine majesty. I'm not really going to go in deep with every one of the Sternritter individually, because I plan on doing what I am with Naruto and One Piece by doing character analysis on them. So don't think I'm just looking over their fights that were happening in Soul Society. Now, if I said before that episode 3 was the best up until that point, then episode 5 has come in and knocked it right out of place. Episode 5 was so hyped. So many interesting and compelling things going on. First, we have Kenpachi rock up with 3 dead Sternritter on his shoulders. Honestly, one of the best looking scenes in the entire anime. This episode is so good because it keeps messing with the watcher's emotions, with how something terrible would happen, and then something like Kenpachi showing up with 3 dead Sternritter, and we start to feel relieved. But then the scene with Byakuya happens, and well damn, now I'm starting to feel a pit in my stomach again, because Asnot uses F the Fear shrift on Byakuya, and proceeds to absolutely shred him with his bunkai in a horrible fashion. Seeing Rukia's mutilated body and the scene with the flies climbing up Byakuya's body was incredibly well executed. It perfectly got across the fear that the animes wanted us to feel. But the worst part is seeing Byakuya be completely helpless against his own power. Seeing the cherry blossoms cascade down on him was so difficult to watch. But like I said before, they like to keep us on our toes, because the next thing we witness is Yamamoto furiously burning Driscoll to ash to avenge his former lieutenant. Just like the fear scene, this moment was really good to get across the feelings of how angry Yamamoto truly was. You can practically feel his wrath. We also get the really touching flashback with Yamamoto and Chojiro. Just some nice little character development for both characters. But after turning Driscoll into complete fodder, Yamamoto dashes through the Soul Society, his spiritual pressure radiating through all his allies, feeding them with hope and the perseverance to keep fighting. After the credits, the camera cuts to Yuha holding a defeated and broken Kenpachi in his grip. But who steps in to save him? None other than the fire monster himself, Yamamoto. This episode is great, like I said, is great with playing with our feelings. Switching between hope and dread 5 times. Hope with Kenpachi showing up. Dread with Byakuya falling. Hope with Yamamoto stepping in. Dread with Kenpachi being defeated. Hope with Yamamoto showing up. This episode is just truly amazing, and funnily enough, the next episode is even better. Now, episode 6 is absolutely crazy. We see the fight between the big bad Yuha and the fiery demon Yamamoto. Now, surprisingly, despite how amazing this is, I'm not actually going to talk about it that much. The fight is just too good to fit into this analysis. It deserves its own whole video. In fact, that might be the video I do straight after this. But basically, the two of them have one of the most amazing battles in all of Bleach, easily in the top 5. The two things I do want to talk about, however, is the ending with Lloyd. I like a lot of people, really don't like this ending much. It's very difficult to imagine that there's some random stern ritter out there who could put up a fight against Yamamoto and apparently take down Kenpachi. It was a bit sloppy on Kubo's part, I reckon. Yuha beating Yamamoto with his own power would make Yuha come across as an even more impressive villain. The only way I would fully accept this ending is if 1, we get to learn more about Lloyd earlier in the show, or 2, we get some kind of flashback with him later. Just something so we can learn a bit more about him. There was one more awesome scene in this episode that wasn't this epic fight between giants, and that's the flashback of Yuha going down to see Aizen. Now, Aizen is my favourite character, so just seeing him again is amazing. But having these two behemoths take each other's measure is so impressive. What's more impressive is Aizen getting one up on him by placing him under his completely broken Kyoka Suigetsu and affecting Yuha's perception of time. This episode was just so freaking amazing. What was even more amazing, and in my opinion the best added scene in this anime, was the appearance of the original 13 captains. This was so freaking hype. I couldn't believe we were seeing it. Later on, their names and what squad they were on were revealed. But like the Yamamoto battle though, I'm going to dedicate a whole video on these guys. After waiting so long to be introduced, they definitely deserve it. After the real Yuha appears, he wastes little time in killing the helpless Yamamoto. Seeing the death of this man, who was so venerated and powerful, was crushing to see. Another death that was hard to witness, or I should say supposed death, was that of Byakuya. After Ichigo breaks out of Killgay's prison, he enters the Soul Society and has a very beautiful moment with Byakuya. Seeing Byakuya defeated and almost lifeless, begging Ichigo to protect the Soul Society was just so beautiful and felt so real. To see Byakuya abandon his pride and weep for Ichigo, the boy he once despised, to help protect his home, was so powerful and so well done. There is an argument to be made that Byakuya should have died here, but I don't want to get into that here. For what this scene was, it nailed it. Honestly, with how good the anime had been at this time, I felt like we were getting spoiled every episode. I couldn't imagine we were having such great episode after episode, and capping off episode 7 with Ichigo's extended battle with Yuha was definitely the right choice. This was seriously Type Moon level of animation. The sword clashes, the motion, the blasts of power, it all looked outstanding. The battle ended with Ichigo holding his broken Bankai, staring helplessly at his two enemies that caused so much destruction to the Seirete. One really cool part of this episode was the Quincy charging through the Seirete, killing all of the Soul Reapers. Like a well-oiled machine of destruction. They were so fluid and came across as a real empire. When we move on to episode 8, it shows us the casualties of the war that the Soul Society was just thrown into. We see the 4th Division handling all of the many wounded and dead Shinigamis. Ichigo finds out his Bankai is permanently broken, and we see the captains all surrounding the head captain Zanpakuto, mourning his loss. Soifon cracks under the hardships they're all facing, and yells at the visored captains about how they hated the old man, but the other captains reprimand her. I know a lot of people dislike Soifon for the role she plays in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, but for me personally, I find all her outbursts quite realistic to her character, so I don't reckon she has a bad showing in the arc. I would, however, like for her not to completely disappear after going to the Soul Palace. That would be neat. But then, it finally happens. We finally get introduced to the Zero Division. They come down from their mighty castles up in the Soul Palace and have an interaction with the current captains. If you haven't read the manga, then I reckon you'd be a bit shocked to finally see these guys, because they definitely don't come across as the most powerful Shinigami in the world. They're all pretty goofy and have fun gimmicks. I honestly really like the Zero Division and reckon Kubo had such a great time with their designs. After Soifon has basically another breakdown, the Zero Division reprimand her by saying that it's the 13 Court Guard Squad's job to protect the Sarite. It's the Zero Division's job to protect the Soul King. Basically saying that their failing had nothing to do with them. They're here because they want to heal the incredibly injured captains, but most importantly, they want to have Ichigo come back to the Soul Palace so they can fix his Bankai, or to be more precise, awaken his true Bankai. Ichigo, eager to fix his Zangetsu, goes with them without any hesitation, alongside an injured Renji, Rukia, and Byakuya. So they travel to Kakushiba's house and use her cannon to fling them all back up. I always found it weird that this was the only way they could get back, but whatever, it's just a quirky little gimmick that Kubo decided to give them. The first half of episode 9, The Drop, is pretty tame compared to the rest of the season. We learn that Shunsui is the new Captain Commander, something I absolutely love, and we get to see Ichigo and Renji regaining their strength through the help of Tenjiro and Hikafune's hot springs and food. But the main part of The Drop is the second half, where we get the revelation that Unohana was the original Kenpachi, and that she was going to fight the current Kenpachi until one of them dies. The main reasoning behind this fight is that Zaraki had placed so many limiters on himself ever since he was just a child, that he's completely crippled his power, and Unohana blames her own weakness for causing it. So she's gonna fight and kill Zaraki as many times as it takes to reawaken that power. This fight is so intense and amazing, not just seeing the usually reserved Unohana let loose and fight, but seeing the relationship these two used to have, and the sheer love they have for battling, something that really only each other could understand. I don't really believe it's romantic at all. Honestly, I think the two have a bond that actually goes beyond romantic love. They have this primal obsession with fighting. It's their very core, and they can only truly share that with each other. This is probably the best Kenpachi fight in the series. The fight that will come later between Kenpachi and Grammy, though, could very possibly well eclipse that. But as the fight drags on to the next episode, Unohana activates her Bankai, and we finally get to see what it looks like. It was always quite ambiguous in the manga, but here in the anime it's obviously depicted as blood. And the way Unohana says her Bankai, and the animation of when she uses it, is truly god tier. I could honestly watch these two fight for another 5 episodes. But after picking up even more intensity, Zaraki eventually overpowers the first Kenpachi, killing her. Seeing Kenny's sadness of never being able to fight her again is heartbreaking. Many fans wondered why Unohana had to die. Why couldn't she have pushed Zaraki to his limits, and once those restraints were removed, bow out of the fight? After all, in some ways, she's more important than Zaraki, given that she's the greatest healer in the Soul Society, perhaps other than Tenjiro. The reason I reckon she had to die, well, 1, it wouldn't be as poetic, but 2, I don't think Unohana would have been able to push Zaraki so far without dying. I joked about it being poetic just before, but I do believe Unohana needed to die for Kenpachi to awaken his dormant power and finally hear the name of his Zanpakuto. Her death was the only thing powerful enough to bring that power out and have Zaraki become the true Kenpachi. I do admit though, I would have liked for Unohana to survive and just have her Kenpachi side die. For the remainder of her life, she would continue to go by Retsu Unohana and be nothing but the caring healer. But unfortunately, we didn't get that. This whole fight was still one of the best moments in all of Bleach. After that amazing fight between both Kenpachis, Ichigo and Renji work with the Blade God, Oetsu, to achieve their true Bankai. Renji succeeds, but in a shocking twist, Ichigo falters and is kicked out of the Soul Palace. Small rant, how is Oetsu able to send people out of and into the Soul Palace? Question mark. And if he has this power, why do you need to use Kakaku's cannon? Seems very much like a plot hole of convenience. But anyway, Oetsu explains that Ichigo has never had an Asatsuchi, and if he wants to continue being a Soul Reaper, then he'll need to learn more about his roots. Now this is so great, because we all know this means Ichigo's finally gonna learn about his family, which has been a long time coming. But just before that, after Oetsu sends Ichigo back to the human world, he has a nice little moment with his elder sister figure, Ikumi. Ikumi isn't in the series much, and is pretty much irrelevant to the plot, but I did enjoy the little bit of character development we got from her, after she shelters Ichigo and tries to get him to open up. But anyway, let's get to the part everyone wants to hear, the Everything But the Rain flashback. Potentially the best flashback in the series, though I would say I liked Turn Back the Pendulum just a little bit more. However, I am an Aizen simp, so I might just be a little bit biased. True, Aizen turns up in this arc, spoiler alert, but it's not as prominent as Turn Back the Pendulum. Anyway, Everything But the Rain is pretty much the flashback of Ichigo's parents, Masaki Kurosuchi, a Quincy from a distinguished house, and Isshin Shiba, a scruffy but lovable Gotai captain who belongs to one of the 4 great clans. Isshin, the captain of Squad 10, hears about Shinigami going missing in the human world in a town called Karakura and decides to investigate. He learns that the Soul Reapers are disappearing when it starts to rain. So in a great moment, he tells 2 officers that if it does start to rain, that they're free to go home, showing Isshin's compassionate side. Not long after that, he encounters the fearsome Hollow, known as White. They have a brief but spectacular fight, which interestingly enough in the anime, they cut off all mention of Isshin using his Bankai, which they did tease in the manga. But as the fight continues, the ever dastardly Aizen steps in and wounds Isshin from behind, alerting Isshin that there is a traitor in the Gotai 13, and that someone's pulling White's strings. While this fight was going on, Ichigo's mother, Masaki, was staying at the Ishida residence. Here we learn more about her relationship with the ever mysterious and cool Ryuken. It's implied that the two are heavily expected to marry to continue the pure-blood Quincy line, but Ryuken, in a real tender moment, wonders if Masaki would even be happy in marrying him, believing that happiness is essential in a Quincy marriage, so that their race can continue to have a good future. It really appears Ryuken has strong feelings for Masaki, and I don't mean in the romantic sense. It seems more like he just very highly values her as a person, basically like he admires her inner strength. And we see this when Masaki rushes out to help Isshin, stating to Ryuken that if she stood by and did nothing, she would never forgive herself, just going to show the type of person she is. Ryuken has a very interesting relationship with his servant, Katagiri, as well. But I might save that for a Ryuken character analysis video. After rushing out of the Ishida residence, Misaki encounters White and Isshin, and in seriously one of the most underrated scenes in the anime, she lets White bite down on her neck, and then proceeds to blow his head off with a small bow and arrow created in her hands. I cannot state how truly cool this looked. After the battle, Isshin and Misaki go back to their regular lives. But not everything is so normal. Misaki, being a Quincy, has been affected by the Hollow's spiritual energy, basically poisoning her. Killgay bumps into her and notices. Misaki, not long after, collapses to the ground, her body not being able to take any more. Ryukun takes her body and flees his house, and he encounters not only Killgay, but Isshin as well. Now I'm going to oversimplify what happens next, because I'm not sure how well I can explain this part. Basically, Misaki needs the four sets opposite to her very own Quincy and Hollow spiritual energy, and Killgay knows how to counteract that, which is basically a Shinigami would need to give up all their powers and enter a special Gigai, and stay by Misaki for the rest of her life to keep the forces at bay. The reason a Shinigami needs to become a human is because humans and Shinigami are the polar opposites of Quincy's and Hollows, and Isshin, without any hesitation, decides to do it, shocking both Killgay and Ryukun with his completely selfless decision, claiming that if he couldn't make the decision to save the life of the girl who saved him, then his future self would laugh at him completely, mirroring Misaki's very own words. I think this sentence from Isshin not only goes to his character, but also convinces Ryukun that Isshin and Misaki are meant for each other. After saving her life, Isshin and Misaki start getting closer to each other. We see a very beautiful montage of their lives together, something I reckon the anime handled really well. But the story isn't completely over. After telling Ichigo all this, he lets him know of one other thing, and that's the huge news that Grand Fisher wasn't the main reason for his mother's death. Misaki, with her strength, could easily take down a Hollow of that power, but the Quincy King, Yuha, used his very much broken power called Ashvalen, which I probably just completely messed up. This ability basically robs any Quincy's who in Yuha's eyes are impure, and it just so happens when he used this ability to take Misaki's power, it left her as helpless as a normal human, and Grand Fisher took this chance to tragically kill her. The Ashvalen also killed Uryu's frail mother, Katagiri. Learning all this information was beautiful and heartbreaking. I loved seeing Isshin and Misaki's love story unfold, but seeing what her fate was incredibly sad. Having her die in front of her son, having her leave her two daughters and husband behind, was tragic. But hearing this story filled Ichigo with all the resolve he needed to accomplish what he couldn't before, and that's to gain an Asasuchi. Oetsu magically knows when Ichigo is ready to come back, and has Mera, I believe her name is, to use the very random teleporting ability to send Ichigo back into the Soul Palace. Now, ignoring all of the plot hole teleporting ability, once Ichigo goes back into the room with the Asasuchi, things start getting really good. Ichigo strides up to them with all the confidence and resolve that he gained by hearing his dad's story, and the Asasuchi all step back and bow, parting the way for Ichigo to go up and claim his prize. He holds out his hand and grasps the Asasuchi's hand, and instantly the black Asasuchi turns to white, showing us all that this is Ichigo's true Asasuchi. Oetsu and his assistants begin to forge Ichigo's swords, and it's here we get confirmed one of the most shocking moments in all of Bleach, probably in the top 3, and that's that old man Zangetsu isn't Ichigo's Zanpakuto. He's actually the essence of his Quincy powers in the form of a younger Yuha. This realization is truly soul-shattering for Ichigo, and makes him doubt everything he once knew. He also learns that his inner hollow white was actually his true Zanpakuto. This was absolutely brilliant writing on Kubo's part, because the whole story we've been told that White refers to himself as Zangetsu. We never believed him, but to have it all this time that he was actually telling the truth is brilliant. Old Man Zangetsu, as I'll continue to call him, tells Ichigo that in the beginning he was trying to suppress his power because he didn't want the rain to keep falling. He didn't want Ichigo to become a Shinigami because that would lead him to having to fight and get hurt. He didn't want to have his other self potentially kill Ichigo when the time came, so he suppressed as much of his power as he could. But as he witnessed Ichigo's growth, witnessed his persistence and determination to overcome every obstacle, regardless of the pain, Old Man Zangetsu started to want Ichigo to succeed. He wanted Ichigo to achieve his goals, because despite himself, he started to care about Ichigo's happiness over his own. In my mind, he started to see Ichigo as a son, which is fitting, given that he's the vestiges of the father of the Quincy. Ichigo, in a moment of extreme maturity, a moment this whole series has been building to, declares both Old Man Zangetsu and his inner hollow White as Zangetsu. He claims that he won't ever ask Old Man Zangetsu to lend him his power, or for his inner hollow to stop interfering. He won't ask them to fight alongside him. He'll fight alone from now on, because Zangetsu is him. This was such an amazing moment. It is Ichigo's finishing his character development. He's made peace with himself by coming to the realization that all three of them are him. And this scene cannot be understated with how beautiful all the art is here. Not to mention the playing of number 1 again was magical. Easily probably my favorite Ichigo moment ever. After this truly great scene, the anime ends with Uryu appearing to join Yuha. Now I believe this whole arc for Uryu has been handled better in the anime, but I will leave all my thoughts on that in his own character analysis video. To sum up these 13 episodes, I reckon they were truly amazing. They knew what to cut out and what needed adding. They handled the art and music beautifully, and I was able to fully immerse myself back into the series. I honestly believe by the end of it, the 1000 Year Blood War arc will be the best in the whole show. I've just been blown away with it all. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of this first season. Was it everything you wanted? Were you disappointed with things? How would you like them to proceed going further? If you've liked this video, then make sure to like and subscribe. I've been Jack Cypher, Cypher out.